Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of the MJ SportsCast. As usual, I'm joined by Jerry Yang. This is Mike Tang. Jerry, how you doing today, man?
Good, man. This NFL offseason have been pretty wild, huh? Like a lot of movement. Like normal off seasons, it's kind of like how the Aaron Rodgers situation turned out, where you hear a lot
Mhm.
of rumors of a quarterback moving to another franchise, or hearing a lot of rumors of moving conferences, maybe even moving within their division. And then once the free agency period opens up, they just stay with their team, right? But this season, man, it's been the opposite of that. I think Jameis Winston's the only one that came back, which is kind of wild. I think the Deshaun Watson thing kind of triggered a lot of other things that happened. But yeah, what do you think of this offseason so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting, to be honest with you. I'm just going to echo what you mentioned. A lot of moving parts here. I just think that with the increased salary cap that's coming up here, owners are more willing to spend a little bit more money and splash around a little bit as opposed to, the previous past off seasons. So we've been kind of seeing that, especially with the quarterback market. And also teams are just willing to kind of pay players at this point. So what do you think so far?
Yeah. It's been wild. I think it's like you said. I think the cap's been increased, and I think specifically the AFC West has gotten really tough, right? Like with the addition of Russell Wilson there, and then that's why I think there's a lot of rumors that more players are coming into that division. I think it all started with KC initially, with Pat Mahomes getting a lot better, and then Justin Herbert getting a lot better. And the Raiders got better, right? The Raiders made some splash signings. They got Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams. And we actually have a special guest today, right? So maybe I think this is a good time to bring it in to kind of talk about the Raiders. So we have our buddy Jeff Wong joining us, our Raiders expert. So Jeff, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on and talk about the Raiders.
Yeah, man. Like I think low key the Raiders have been making a lot of good moves and got a lot of good signings. I mean, specifically, I think Chandler Jones was a huge get for you guys. And then no one knew that Devontae Adams was going to be in the market to go to the Raiders, right? I think a lot of people assumed they're going to stay with Green Bay, especially when he got franchise tag there. What are your thoughts, man? I think being really close with the team and knowing that you have this new team built, what do you think about the Raiders' free agent moves so far?
Yeah, great question. I'm very excited. So, I mean, they had a decent season last season despite all the chaos. I think it was just they were fortunate actually to win 10 games and sneak into the playoffs. So, and what they did was actually pretty impressive considering the circumstances they dealt with last year. So, this offseason so far, I'm loving it. Obviously the Raiders made a lot of moves, with the GM, new coach, basically bringing in a whole new regime. But I think, why they saw the potential of the Raiders was, and why they wanted to take over this particular team, because, they obviously have upside. And, I think they just need the right leadership, the right coaching to really to get them to the next level. They've been teasing the fan base for so long, but now I think they're really pretty much on the map. And so far, I love the moves so far. They're aggressive. The new regime has been extremely aggressive, pretty much getting the number one defensive end in the free agency market with Chandler Jones. This guy I was shocked, but he has 107 sacks in his career. And, so that's just going to shore up the D line. And pairing him with Max Crosby is going to bring a lot of pressure and a lot of chaos for opposing quarterbacks to deal with. And then Adams, what else can you say? I think everybody knows what Devontae Adams is capable of and what he displayed in Green Bay. So he's just going to shore up and he's just going to make the offense even more prolific at this point.
Yeah, I actually feel really confident now that Josh McDaniels took over. I would have been more worried for the Raiders if it was still John Gruden
Mhm.
and that regime, right? Mainly because he hasn't been proven either, right? Whereas Josh McDaniels, I think, actually made the playoffs with Tim Tebow, and he has an impressive resume with the Patriots and learning that system. So you're kind of getting the best offensive coordinator turned coach in some ways, right? So, and with the league leaning more towards offense, I think the Raiders have a big advantage here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't, if John Gruden was with the team still, I don't think he makes this move, And, when he joined the Raiders as the coach, it was all about him and his ego, right? Where he was like, you know what, Khalil Mack, you want some top dollars? We're not going to pay you and we're going to ship you out, and we're not getting as much as in return. Also with Amari Cooper, too. They shipped him out when, honestly, who was going to replace Amari Cooper as the number one receiver? There was really no one on that roster to do it here. So I think McDaniels is really going complete 180 in terms of trying to win now, spending dollars now. People say that he's going the Belichick route, but Belichick never really did this move where he traded for a player and then re-signed him to one of the top position, players in that field. So I don't know. I'm kind of in between here because I can see what McDaniels is doing, right? And you got to applaud him for trying to get the best talent out there. But damn, Devontae Adams is 30 years old, and they extended him to what, like a 4 or 5 year contract, right? So he'll be 34, 35, making what, $30 million a year. So we don't know how he's going to be in 4 or 5 years. But at the same time, I think the Raiders are just going for it. They're just totally
I
going
think
for
Dave
it now.
Ziegler, the GM, gets a lot of credit too, right? I think a lot of people think Josh McDaniels making all the calls, but I feel like hiring Ziegler was actually the difference maker, and having him in charge of real GM with experience. So, but yeah, like Jeff, I want you to respond to Mike's comment there. What do you think? I think the signing of Devontae Adams definitely is polarizing, right? You have one camp that's really excited what Raiders did it, but then you have another camp that's thinking what Mike's saying. You're kind of tying a lot of money in one player that's, on the latter half or the opposite end, I guess, of the peak. So what do you think?
Yeah, I could see some of the it was an aggressive move. Is that it was a big commitment financially, but I think we're talking about Devontae Adams here, and plus, he really wanted to play for the Raiders, and him and Carr, played in college together, and they were spectacular in college together. I read some stat Devontae Adams caught like 38 touchdowns from Carr in those 2 years that they were at Fresno State. So they were like a lethal combination. From what I know, that's Carr was one of the main reasons he wanted to come and play on the Raiders. So was it a big commitment financially for someone his age? But, I realistically think he has, by 35, he's still going to be producing really good football. And he hasn't suffered any major injuries so far in his career, and he's extremely productive every year. So I think it's worth a chance. I mean, if the a top 3 receiver in the NFL wants to join your team, I don't think you're going to you're not going to turn that kind of talent down. And and I like the moves that Ziegler made and McDaniels, because if you look back at the Pats offense, they like to be they especially when they were most successful, they had that 1 year when they had Randy Moss. But besides that, those years they really haven't had like a true number one big time receiver. But when you have someone that prolific in your offense, and the Raiders already have Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, and there were already a problem for defenses to deal with last year. I mean, you could see Waller and Renfrow were constantly double teamed, and that's pretty much the defensive game plan, to take one or two, take them away from the game plan. Now with Adams in the mix, like what can defenses do? Like, who are you going to focus your defensive attention on? And if you focus on Devontae Adams, then Waller and Renfrow are just going to eat. They're going to eat all day long. So it just causes many problems for defenses now to deal with this Raiders offense.
Yeah, I think their biggest unknown is actually Derek Carr, right? So I think I'm glad you mentioned it. And I think Gruden never really believed in Carr, and that's why he gave Marcus Mariota a 2-year, $19 million contract, who, signed with the Falcons now. So obviously he was a free agent they let walk out, which is good because now you don't really have a QB competition. But then you have a big dependency with Carr, and I think that's going to be the biggest weak spot. So do you think, you mentioned Adams signed with the Raiders because of Carr. Does that mean they have to extend Carr and keep Carr around as long as they have Devontae Adams? And do you think, if you have a chance to upgrade at QB next year, do you think they'll shun away from it because they have Adams? What are your thoughts on Carr?
Yeah, I think Carr's here to stay. I know like the fan base is like 50-50 wanting, there's some that want him to replace, and then there's Raider fans who want him to stay, and ride or die with him. But I think Carr is here to stay for sure. And is he a top 5 quarterback in the NFL with like the arm of Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert? No, but he's good enough to win in the playoffs, and he's definitely good enough to lead a team. If like Jimmy G, if everything falls in place, they have a solid defense. They have enough weapons on offense where Carr's not going to be the one who's going to lose the game for you. But so I think he's definitely here to stay. And I think he in this Josh McDaniels new offensive system, I think he can be even more successful than what we've seen him under Gruden's system.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the NFC or the AFC West is the toughest division now, right? Like I think a lot of people can agree, especially if you look at the quarterback play. Where do you think the Raiders stack up against those other teams? With KC, I think always the favorites. I think even this year, people are seeing them potentially being AFC champions, right? So it's not just the favorites for your division. And then we're seeing Chargers getting better, and now Russell Wilson got to the Broncos. So are you nervous, first of all, for the Raiders in your division, and how do you think you guys will do?
Yeah, the division is just stacked. So I think Mike asked the question if going for Devontae Adams and making that kind of commitment. I think it was really what spurred McDaniels and Ziegler was the moves that the division was making. If they didn't bring in Devontae Adams, it would be a challenge to compete with these teams. So I think it was like, hey, if these teams in our division are going to be super aggressive and trying to win now, we can't just let them get one step ahead of us. So we got to make moves to counter these teams as well. I think it's going to be extremely competitive. I mean, all these teams are extremely talented, but I like the Raiders' chances. It's going to be, all those teams have weapons both on offense and defense, and I think the Raiders do as well, making these moves with Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams and a whole bunch of other moves that they, these players who aren't like big time free agents, but they're definitely filling the void and as far as supplying depth in a lot of key positions that the Raiders didn't have last year. So I think the Raiders can compete. I can't make a prediction as far as if they're going to win the division now, obviously, but I think talent wise, I think they're on par with these teams.
This year the Niners are going to play the Raiders. So we'd love to have you on that week. And maybe we can make some type of jersey bet or something, to make it a little bit fun.
Oh, for sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, guys, I just think sometimes we tend to overhype a lot of these like best teams within a division thing because, a couple of seasons ago, the NFC West was considered one of the top divisions in football. But then when you look at it the past year or two, they're not really, they weren't really dominating as we thought they'll be, right? You saw how the Cardinals melted in the playoffs with Kyler Murray here. The Seahawks, really, they weren't really too competitive the last 2 seasons as well. So it was basically kind of like a 2-team race, right? With the Rams and the Niners in the NFC West. We just don't know how the AFC West is going to turn out. Who knows? Maybe the Raiders can turn it to a top team and jump over KC and the Chargers here. Who knows how Denver's going to do with Russell Wilson? So I'm just saying it's way too early for fans to really overhype a division and say it's the best in football when we haven't really played any games yet.
I do still disagree with you that NFC West wasn't the best because we had 3 playoff teams, right? 3 teams in the playoffs, and one of them won the Super Bowl. And I think the same could be said with the AFC West, right? There's going to be, I can imagine 3 teams from the AFC West making the playoffs as well, right? And potentially one of them winning the Super Bowl. So I know you can't really say it now; it's kind of early, but it seems you can still kind of project, right? At least the way it's trending. And the way the schedule is going to be played out, and I think the you can't underestimate, I guess, talent in the end too, and coaching, right? And I think right now that division has the most talent and the best coaches, in my opinion, right? From especially on the AFC side. So So, which is, looking a lot stronger than NFC. Like a lot of the quarterbacks from the NFC are going to the AFC for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a shock.
Yeah. Well, I applaud the Raiders for just being uber aggressive on acquiring a guy like Adams here. They had to do it if they're going to compete.
Mhm.
So it at least puts them in the map here. And they have a pretty stable quarterback in Carr to kind of lead them there. So they could win 11 games or so with this lineup. So it's pretty promising for the fan base.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I just want to add that the Bengals, the previous year, they were in last place in the division, and then last year they added Jamar Chase, and they were in the Super Bowl. So things can turn around very quickly for NFL teams, especially nowadays.
They added more offensive linemen too, so they're looking stronger and stronger. So you never know, I guess, right? So we'll see how it goes. Well, Jeff,
Hey,
well,
Jeff,
thank you for your
well,
time.
one more thing, Jeff. I know you follow the Warriors pretty closely, and you and I have had some pretty extensive conversation about how the team is doing, some of the draft picks that have been acquired by us. But what's your take on kind of how the season's going, specifically with the news of James Wiseman here? It looks like he was rehabbing pretty well. He was playing in some G League games. They were limiting his minutes, but lately, they're slowing him down. They're shutting him down due to some knee soreness. Do you think he's a bust at this point?
I would say he has to be considered a bust at this point. I mean, that's just my honest opinion, considering the options they had in the draft when they took him. I specifically wanted them to take LaMelo, but it wasn't a popular opinion. It wouldn't be a popular move in the Bay Area. But I mean, considering I know Wiseman is still so young, and he definitely has a lot of potential still. But I mean, he really hasn't produced much for this franchise. And you see some of the young big men that are in the league today, like for one, the guy with Cavs, like Evan Mobley, he's in the conversation to be Rookie of the Year, and I think that's pretty much what all Warrior fans were expecting Wiseman to be. Someone of that kind of talent, caliber, that size for a young center, but it just hasn't materialized so far, and it just looking shaky at this point as far as a pick.
Yeah, he seems like a high risk pick to begin with, right? Like the amount of games that he played in college was like 3, less than 3. So it was questionable at the time, but I think the Warriors were drafting for need rather than best available, which unfortunately has its risks, right? So I agree with you that LaMelo, looking back, obviously hindsight 2020 was a better pick there, but I think they believed in Jordan Poole and what he could have brought, right? And they probably saw them as the same player. So we're seeing Poole kind of pan out a little bit better now. But yeah, it would have been nice to have that option there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the Warriors foresaw the injury risk with James Wiseman here coming out of college. He didn't really indicate any sort of injury history, both in high school and his short time, playing in college there. So it's tough because when you look at his career so far, you can kind of compare him to Joel Embiid. Embiid was out for 2 years straight. He didn't play a single game. And look how he is right now, right? Or he could turn out into Greg Oden, where Oden only played 105 games in his career. 105. Yeah. That's less than 2 seasons, 2 full seasons worth here. And some other big guys that we can kind of compare to. Yao Ming made it to 486 games. Ralph Sampson made it to 456. That's less than 500 games for a big guy. So it's pretty concerning, to be honest with you. I don't know how to project it, but we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess.
I mean, there's best case scenarios like Blake Griffin, for example, right? Then he missed like the first whole season, and look at him now; he's still playing in his old age, right? So I think we just have to wait and see, like you said. I think it's disappointing, though. I mean, this is supposed to be the year where we kind of run things, right? With Clay back, and we thought we were gonna have Curry healthy. I think that's putting a damper to the season as well. So I think the Warriors just need to prove while Curry's out that they can play without Wiseman and without Curry and see how many games we can win, right? But it definitely would help to have Curry back, especially in the playoffs. So.
Yeah, I mean, Curry, it looks like he has a sprained foot, guys, and he won't be back into the first round of the playoffs here. But do you guys think the Warriors can make a deep push here with kind of like an injured Curry coming into the playoff round. No Wiseman, no center depth. What do you guys think?
I'll let Jeff answer first as our guest here.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I think, do they have a chance of winning the championship? Sure, definitely. But I think, would they be the favorites to win the championship? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think they're too dependent on Curry having a monster game to win. Can he deliver? Sure, there's games he's going to deliver monster games, but yeah, I mean the NBA is just, the playoff teams are just so stacked. I can't honestly say, if they're going to be holding the trophy at the end of the tournament, but because there's just so many stacked teams. But yeah, I think they're going to be a little bit too dependent on Curry having huge games, and I think that's going to be eventually what catches up to them eventually.
Yeah, for me, I have a slightly different take. I do agree it's pretty stacked, right? But a lot of times Curry doesn't do so well in the playoffs. Actually, if you look at historically, he has never won MVP, right? And he always had struggles, especially in the later rounds. So I think guys like Iguodala, why they brought him back, because he's a playoff machine, right? Playoff monster. And I guess the only part I'm worried about is really the younger guys, like playing in the regular season, for example, like Poole, right? Playing in the playoffs are a completely different thing. But at least we have some experience from last year, which kind of helps. But let's see how we can integrate guys like Kuminga and Moody a little bit, see if we can get some contributions from them. I don't think we're going to be depending on Curry as much, at least initially when we come back. And, we're going to have to live with it. And I think the last few games is going to be telling of how well we're going to make it, So I think it's kind of too early to answer right now. It's only been one game without without Curry, and Draymond got ejected in the third, so, and we almost still won that game in some ways, right? Just like a controversial ending at the end. So I wouldn't count the Warriors out, but at the same time, like you said, I don't think they dropped from probably the second favorite team to win the championship to maybe a fifth or sixth at this point. I know the Vegas odds still have them at second, right? They still have the Suns winning the West, so they're the first. And then the championship going to the Nets or the Suns, and the third being the Warriors, right? So we're still up there. I think that's a little generous for the Warriors. I think they're banking on Curry coming back. That's why the odds are so high there. But I can project at least a fifth, favorite team to win is the Warriors. So. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for coming on our show. Do you want to plug anything for any of our viewers and listeners? How can they find you?
No, I'm good. I'm not too active or sports crazy on my social media profiles. It's mostly family stuff, so it's all good.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on. I think much appreciated. And we'll get you back on, especially when the Warriors or the Raiders play the Niners. I think it'll be a fun conversation then. So thanks a lot, Jeff Wong, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
All right, cool. It's interesting to always get like a different perspective, especially in a different division as well. And I think I echo your sentiment in some ways about Devontae Adams. Well, I think he was the best free agent wide receiver. So they had to make a move. I think iron sharpens iron. That division is getting sharper, and you're gonna fall behind, right? And I think like the way too. It's not like they're rebuilding. But
yeah, I was surprised that Devontae Adams is 30 years old, and he only has quote unquote two Pro Bowl appearances. I thought he would have a little bit more than that. There, it just seems like he's been in the league for a while, right? And maybe he didn't dominate until later in his career, but hopefully he has some legs left to kind of put some good years in for the Raiders.
Yeah, definitely. I think he has a good chance to, at least, with Josh McDaniel's system. This is probably the best wide receiver he's had in his whole career. Thinking back from the Broncos and from the Patriot years, I don't think they've ever had a true number one wide receiver. Like Gronk was their first option. He's a tight end. So,
yeah, definitely. Let's kind of talk about some of the NFL stuff that we brushed up on earlier, some of the quarterbacks are just getting swooped up, don't you think? Matt Ryan to the Colts for a third-round pick here. Saints re-signing Jameis Winston to a 2-year deal with $21 million guaranteed. The Falcons agreeing to a contract with Marcus Mariota, but that leaves one quarterback that's still unsigned, still not traded, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo here.
Well, Baker Mayfield too, right? So it's not like he's the best available, in my opinion.
Yeah. So it looks like, in my opinion, Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of stuck in no man's land, and the Niners are stuck with just keeping him, on the roster for now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen? No one wants Jimmy, according to Jeannie Liu. Thanks for the comment, Jeannie.
You know what? I think I'm almost leaning towards the Niners should just cut bait and release Jimmy. I was actually watching some of the pro days the pro days clips and highlights of rookie quarterbacks coming in. Right, I think we're actually underestimating some of these quarterbacks. I was looking at the guy from Liberty, Mills something. He's looking pretty good. Like he has the experience. He has like 4 years in college, 2 of Auburn, and he was Bowl Pro MVP for the last 2 years that he was there. Given it's Liberty, so it's not a tough division. But wouldn't you rather have that guy instead of Lance? So I'm wondering if the Niners might have made a mistake there in some ways. And the guy has an arm. Like there's a clip online where the guy threw for 60 plus yards, right, with no problems. And he looked like a really team guy because after he did that, he kind of shook hands with all the right receivers out there that was helping him out and the coaches and things like that. So it's not like he's a bad guy. It seems like a leader. So so I think at this point our only chance really is I think the Panthers obviously are desperate for a QB. They realize Sam Darnold is not the answer.
Yeah.
And I think the Seahawks, but they're in our division, so unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the Texans, if they want to move away from Davis Mills or let Davis Mills hold a Clipper for a year, similar to what we did with Lance, right? But I don't think that's an ideal destination for Jimmy G, who's already in this situation. And I don't buy into the fact that Jimmy G got the surgery and was trying to, harm the Niners in some ways. I think he wanted a fresh start as well. I think he wanted a new team. I think it's the best interest of Jimmy to be out of our roster as well. So, but I think people are just worried that he's not going to make it for training camp. They're worried about the 25 mil that's guaranteed to him. And whereas Baker's 18 million, so he's a little bit more desirable. He'll be ready for training camp at OTAs. So in some ways, they're kind of comparable in terms of talent, but what Jimmy has over Baker is the leadership factor in the playoff experience, right? But is it really worth that $7 million difference and waiting until he gets healthy? So I think there's a lot of unknowns, but end of the day, I feel like it's either Jimmy will get traded during the draft or right before it, or they have to cut him. So. What do you think?
I think they could afford to wait, to be honest with you. And then if there's no suitors, they'll just have to cut him.
Yeah.
Right.
He says, I'd take Jimmy over Baker, though. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people would from the Niners' perspective because we know him so well. But I'm not sure other teams are thinking the same. They're only looking at the price tag and their abilities, So, yeah, but I think another thing that's going against the Niners is also the waiting game, right? Like everyone knows the Niners have to cut Jimmy, right? And if they cut Jimmy, then you can renegotiate with Jimmy G for a lesser contract, not lose any draft picks. So there's no pressure for other teams to trade as well. So I think that's why it's so grim, because I felt like in the beginning of this offseason, I think it was almost like a sure bet that we would have had Jimmy traded by now, and the fact it hasn't happened and there's less and less options, I think there's a little bit of a panic in Niners land.
Yeah. And I think I just think the Bay Area and just the team in general has overvalued Jimmy. to the point where we think we could get a couple high round picks. But honestly, what we're seeing on TV is what the rest of the NFL is seeing on TV. And that's inconsistency. It's a guy who can't make all the throws. It's a guy who throws a lot of interceptions. It's a guy who's not going to, lead you to win games by himself. He's going to need talent around him. And it's like, we all see that, but then we all kind of cloud ourselves to think that, okay, Jimmy is a great quarterback. Let's get like 2 second round picks for him. When in reality, what we see is what everyone else is seeing, guys. Like, basically, he's not a really good quarterback, right? He's a bottom tier kind of quarterback that needs a lot of talent around him. And that's what we're seeing in free agency is, a lot of quarterbacks being taken, ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo.
I think the difference is with what the Niners fans see and what the public sees is we're also seeing the other side of it, right? Where he's a locker room leader, he's a mentor to Trey Lance. So you have a tendency to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? I think naturally you want your own starting quarterback to do well. So you're willing to ignore some of the deficiencies on the field and have his likability, right? He's obviously more likable than Baker. I think that's why most Niner fans would take him over Jimmy or over Baker, right? It's because he's the leader, because he's such a positive guy and such a mature dude, right? Like he basically sucked it up for a year and played behind Trey Lance, knowing Lance is going to replace him. And he still took it in stride, very professional, right? So we see that side of things. But I think other teams outside the Bay Area isn't really considering that, or maybe that's like a smaller factor towards their decision to sign him than the fans' perspective, right? So
yeah, a lot of scouts on other teams, a lot of like GMs, they're not asking owners, or they're not asking York and those guys, oh, how's Jimmy in the locker room? Is he a great leader? And all that. They're just watching the film, right? That's all they're watching. And they're trying to kind of compare him to all the quarterbacks available, and he's just not really fitting in. And it's just unfortunate because with the surgery as well, that just kind of makes his trade value dwindle, as the weeks go by.
And let's give a shout out to, Eric Armstead, George Kittle, and D4 for restructuring their contracts and making room, right? And that, I guess a lot of credit goes to Parag. So reading more into it, they're paying out their year's salary and signing bonuses to be able to make room so that we don't have to cut Jimmy. I mean, the deadline was Wednesday of last week. We would have had to cut Jimmy to be under the cap. And after doing that restructuring, now we don't have to, right? So they bought a lot of time for Jimmy. So it kind of shows the culture of the team as well, that they were kind of making smart moves in terms of the salary. I was looking at the dead cap for the Niners is about $5 million, and you compare that to the Falcons actually, between Julio Jones being cut or traded and Matt Ryan now being traded, they're actually $60 million plus in dead cap money. So that's really limiting what that franchise can do. Unfortunately, the Niners are smarter about their money, and we can make some moves actually if we do cut Jimmy, because there's no dead cap with Jimmy, right? That 25 million's off the books. I think maybe millions stays on there, but you can do a lot with 24 million. You can re-sign Bosa, you can re-sign Debo, and maybe even get a difference maker out there, So we'll see how things progress, but I'm leaning towards him being released at this point.
Yeah. Any quick thoughts about the Niners signing Ray McCloud? Ray McCloud to a 2-year deal here, a punt returner, and also Hassan Ridgeway, defensive line, to a 1-year deal. I like the Ray McCloud deal, but I heard that he fumbles a lot or drops a lot of balls, especially during punt returns. So that could be an issue. But what are your thoughts about those two signings real quick?
Yeah, I like Ray. I thought he was good. I heard about the fumbling and all that stuff, but I think he's, I think it was more earlier in his career. He did decent with the Steelers. I think Steelers would have loved to keep him if they were actually really serious about contending, but I think the Steelers are kind of in a little bit of a rebuild mode. And then Hassan, I think that marks the end of Arden Key, right? I think that's after we signed Hassan. He went to go visit Detroit and the Jags, so I think Arden Key's gone. But I have a lot of faith in this franchise when it comes to defensive line and defensive ends, right? They know what they're doing, and linebackers, right? They're really good up front, So I think Hassan's probably gonna be one of those guys where we didn't think much of him, and one of these days he's gonna make a couple good plays in back-to-back games, and we're gonna know his name.
Yeah.
So the Niners have been really good about doing that and highlighting guys like that. So
All right. Let's move on to some baseball stuff here.
oh,
It's been a couple weeks since they agreed on coming back to spring training, and they're playing some games, and players are being acquired here. But in addition to Jock Peterson, he was signed by the Giants. I thought that was a pretty solid move. But we really had a chance to get Trevor Story. Right, but he signed with the Red Sox, and they agreed to a 6-year deal worth $140 million. And we talked about this in the last episode or two about the Giants not signing guys to long-term contracts here. Do you think the Giants are hurting themselves, by not being aggressive enough in free agency and getting guys like Trevor Story to come play for them?
I feel like they have a lot of faith in their current roster, and this is shown with Darren Ruff, right? They gave him a 2-year deal for $6.25 million, buying out his arbitration years. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like if you put Darren Ruff on the Dodgers, for example, he'd probably be the worst player on the team. You know what I mean? So or the analytics they're making some analytics math there and making a miracle out there, or there's being blind faithfulness, and we kind of see that in the past as well, where the Giants kind of keep guys for a little bit too long, So, what's up, G says, I need to get that spring training hat. Have you seen a spring training hat? I don't know if I've seen
he says there's a spring training G hat. Right?
Oh, that Giants hat, the spring training Giants hat. Yeah, I have to check that out. But yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think fans are really concerned because Posey and Chris Bryant are not in the middle of the lineup anymore, and who have the Giants really replaced them with, right?
Yeah.
Jock Peterson.
And here's what Genius said: Giants never sign a long contract, especially because they really believe in their upcoming prospects. Well, they gave Evan Longoria a big contract, right? And a few other people I can name. I think they're traumatized from the Matt Cain contract, actually, if you think about it, right? After he signed a big contract, he was never really the same, and they were kind of stuck with him. And they avoided a disaster with Bumgarner by not signing him to a long-term contract. So maybe they're learning from those two signings to not give out big contracts unless a guy's proven they can play for 10 plus years.
Yeah, so, it was not only the Matt Cain contract, but it was also going outside and signing Jeff Samardzija to quite a few years, and also to Johnny Cueto, in which he was injured for most of that time.
Yeah, and Zito, right? Like Jeannie pointed out, traumatized by Zito. So I think pitching, they're definitely not giving big contracts to pitching. They're learning that lesson. But maybe bats, they need to consider a little bit more. Maybe the Evan Longoria one was the big they're stuck with, but he's still producing, right? So
also for a long time, Jerry, a lot of hitters did not want to come play at AT&T Park just because their numbers would definitely dwindle. Their home run, they're going to hit less home runs, a lot of it's about stats. So a lot of hitters just didn't want to come here too.
But they modified the park now, right? So isn't it better now? I don't know. I
don't know. I think it's still pretty tough to hit home runs, at least to right field. That wall is still pretty daunting, and the alleys are still fairly deep. Right. And you're still going to play in the cold weather a lot of times too at night, and the wind. So it's tough unless you can find guys who just want to win, purely. Then we're going to have to try to develop talent like what Jeannie mentioned.
You don't think we'll get a guy like Carlos Correa or something to come in here eventually?
Yeah, I think he's just asking for a lot of money too. We're just not going to be in competition for those free agents.
That's true. That sucks, man. It sucks. I think this team has a lot of potential. But I wouldn't count them out though, right? Because last season, you remember we were kind of pessimistic about them before the season started, and lo and behold, one of the best records in the best record in regular season. We made the playoffs, right?
Hey,
So
at any time you could always change your over under an 85.5 wins for the whole season, Jerry. I know it
yeah,
was an overwhelming choice last week to go for the over here, but after hearing this, do you think that's changed your mind at all about the 85.5? I think you picked 93 wins or 95 wins here.
19.
You can always alter your choice there, Jerry, to maybe 80, 88, 89 wins or lower.
No, I'll stick with the over for now. We'll see how it goes. If the Dodgers sign more players, maybe it'll be changed. I think that's Freddie Freeman was a shocker, right? I don't think we talked too much about that, but what were your thoughts on that one, man? Like Freddie Freeman was. I didn't think they had enough money to sign him, but I guess no one cares about the luxury tax anymore.
No, I think once Matt Olson was traded to the Braves, Freddie Freeman was connected to the Dodgers instantly.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So
Mm.
that's kind of what the scenario was. And the thing with baseball, as opposed to football, is that, in baseball, if you go over whatever cap there is, you just pay a small fine, right? In relative to the revenue that you're making in the sport, as opposed with football and basketball, you're paying a huge fine.
You can't do it, right?
Yeah,
There's
in football you can't do it, and then in basketball, I think you could do it, but you pay a huge fine for that, and it comes out of the team and the owner's expense.
right.
So
And then Jeannie Lou says, "Ugh, Freddie, I feel like he doesn't belong on that Dodgers team." Yeah, no, I agree. It was. I guess he's always been a guy where I thought he was a pretty good player, and good character dude as well. So that's why I think it's a little bit disappointing to see him in our rival, right? So, but well, whatever.
yep. All right, let's go to our picks of the week.
All right, picks of the week. We only have one. So second game without Curry. This time, hopefully Draymond doesn't get ejected. He was fined 25K last game, but the Warriors are favored at 7.5 versus Orlando tonight. And over under is 214.5.
Okay.
Who do you have, Mike?
Yeah, it was a pretty devastating loss to the Spurs at home this past weekend here, and I think the Warriors have responded really good after losses. So I'm going to pick the Warriors in this one. On the road here at Orlando, they're not that great of a team. Vegas picked them 7.5-point favorites. I think they're going to win by like 5 points or so. I think Klay Thompson's going to be playing right, and Wiggins will be out there. So I'm going to expect some pretty big games from those two, in addition to Jordan Poole. So I'm going to pick the Warriors, and I'm also going to pick the over on this one. I think it's going to be a fairly high-scoring game here at 214.5, and I just expect the Warriors to win. What are your thoughts?
So do you think you said it was a 5-point game though, right? So aren't you taking Orlando at that point because the Warriors are favored? So
I think they're favored 7.5.
Yeah,
right. But then if they win by 5,
they have to cover.
oh yeah, they have to cover. Okay, never mind. Here, I had it reversed, guys.
Yeah, that's why I thought. That's why it was correct to you.
Okay, if that's the case though, I do think the Warriors will cover here, and I think they're gonna win by 8 or 9 points against Orlando. It's gonna be a higher scoring game than what we've seen before. But I just think the Warriors are going to bounce back. They're going to watch some film. Jordan Poole will go off a little bit here. So picking the Warriors. How about you?
I'm feeling a lot more pessimistic after that conversation with Jeff and you. So maybe that's stemming from it. You say it's 5.5, also maybe fed into it a little bit. But sorry, I'm gonna pick Orlando plus 7.5. I still think the Warriors will win.
Yeah.
7.5 just seems like a lot to overcome without Curry there. They're still trying to figure it out, right? Figure out roles and things like that. But you are right. Orlando's terrible, right? They're not a great team. It's just a road game. No faith, for me in a road game. Anything could happen when you're on the road. So, but I think 7.5 points I feel pretty safe with. Orlando plus 7.5. 214.5 was kind of interesting. It's actually the lowest over under of the day. Very shocking. Usually the Warriors are up in the 220, sometimes 230 range. Maybe because they don't feel like Curry's there. But usually when the line's way too low like that or way too high, I tend to go with the win, so I'm going to take the under because maybe Vegas knows something we don't. And, maybe there's something there, right? Maybe there's something that they see defensively that tips the scale there. So that's why it's so low. So I'm going to go with the under. But yeah, it should be a good game. I think this will be one of those things, right? I think the next couple games are going to be really telling of how the Warriors handle themselves without Curry. Curry has become a safety net for the Warriors a lot of times, And so, yeah.
All right. Well, let's go through our shout outs here.
Yeah. So Jeannie Lou and What's Up G, thank you for tuning in as always. I think much appreciated on the comments. You guys add a lot to the show when you guys comment, right? So one last thing before we sign off is we never talked about the Curry injury in detail, I think, right? So did you think that was dirty by Marcus Smart, or what do you think?
I honestly, I watched a couple replays of it. I thought it was a basketball play. I'm not going to say if it was dirty or not, but it was a basketball play. And I don't think Marcus Smart had intent of hurting him, right? But honestly, when you're categorized as a dirty player or as a rough player, as Marcus Smart has been, you kind of put yourself in these type of situations, right? So he put himself in that situation to kind of bang up against Curry's foot. So you can call it dirty, you can call it whatever it is here, but it didn't look like he had intent. So
Right.
I'm going to call it a not dirty play, but unfortunate that it had to come from a dirty player.
It was reckless for sure, and I think the Celtics were playing really aggressively, right? Because I think they felt like a finesse game wouldn't beat the Warriors. The Warriors are a better finesse team, so they try to out physical them, and I think that was the result. And we have a comment from What's Up G. He didn't think it was dirty either,
Yeah.
and he said he was blocking out as he was diving for the ball. Yeah, I agreed. It just looked bad, right? Especially, I think the continuation of the play looked really bad too, where he was basically jump kicking Clay on the replay. That looked terrible. And some of the stills, like photos of that, looked really bad, right? I think that made it look worse than it actually was. But I tend to agree with you guys. Not dirty, but reckless. Probably could have been avoided.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, it's at our expense, right? So.
Yep, definitely. Well, guys, it was a good one this week. Thanks again to our guest, Jeff Huang, for coming on to our show to talk about the Raiders and the Warriors here. And we will see you guys all next week. Take care, everyone.
Sure.